I discovered my parents stole my $200,000 trust fund to support my sister. When I exposed them, they got furious and kicked me out of the house. To provide some context, my sister Corey has Down syndrome. She is 4 years older than me, and I've known for as long as I can remember that my sister was different from me in many ways. Even as a small child, I noted that Corey would respond strongly to every circumstance. If things didn't go her way, even in minor ways, she would scream and weep in a manner that most children did not. It was as if she couldn't take the frustration of things not living up to her expectations. Growing up, Corey had no pals. She had difficulty picking up on social cues and frequently came across as abrupt or even rude. While she wasn't trying to be impolite, her directness could be off-putting to other children who didn't comprehend her situation. As a result, many youngsters preferred to maintain their distance, leaving her feeling alienated. As a result, my parents made it a point to include me in her social life, frequently reminding me that I needed to bring her along when I went out with my friends. I realized they wanted her to feel included and have someone to interact with. So I didn't mind having my elder sister along. I felt it would be wonderful for her to have some company and perhaps even make a few friends through my own social circles. However, spending time with Corey in the company of my friends was not easy. Her social skills were weak, and she struggled to integrate into groups. She often acted out in unexpected ways. She would occasionally push or even strike other children, especially if they had something she wanted. As a result, over time, my pals were less interested in hanging out with me if Corey was also around. They didn't want to deal with her unpredictable behavior, and I understood why. They were merely kids who wanted to play without interruptions or outbursts of hostility. Corey's impatience and inclination to lash out made things difficult for everyone, and I couldn't blame my friends for backing away from those circumstances. I understood that, as her sister, I had a responsibility to support and be there for Corey, especially given her struggles. But, to be honest, I needed space to mature, find my own friends, and live my life independently. However, my parents never let me be myself. Whenever I wanted to go something alone or spend time with my friends without Corey, they made me feel awful for even considering leaving her behind. They'd say things like, "Sisters should stick together," or "You need to think about Corey. She's your sister." It was as if they expected me to always choose her over my friends or anybody else, no matter what I wanted or needed for myself. What made things worse was that they never seemed to put these same efforts into assisting Corey comprehend how to change her conduct or develop her social skills. They never sat her down to explain why sharing or being compassionate with others could help her connect with others more effectively. Instead, they seemed to accept that I would fill in all of the gaps in her social life. So, throughout the years, I became Corey's lone buddy by default. Don't get me wrong, I adore Corey. She is family, and I recognize that none of this is her fault. I understand she confronts her own set of obstacles every day, and I can't imagine what it's like to be in her shoes. But, at the same time, do you know how it feels to be the invisible child in a family? My parents' entire world revolved around Corey, with every choice, idea, and money intended to make her life easier and more comfortable. Corey requires ongoing attention and specialized care. My parents have spent a lot of money on her numerous therapies over the years, including physiotherapy to help with her physical coordination, speech therapy to improve her communication, and occupational therapy to help her develop motor skills and independence. She also gets regular checkups, medical tests, and evaluations to track her progress and keep her health in control. The care she requires is considerable and time-consuming. While I fully grasp its significance, it frequently felt as if there was little place for me. One of Corey's specific issues is her lack of impulse control. which makes understanding boundaries difficult. For example, she is obsessed with the color pink and enjoys anything pink. She is instantly drawn to anything in that color. She feels impelled to seize it, hold it, and not let go. It doesn't matter whether it's a pink pocketbook, a teddy bear, a piece of clothes, or someone else's prized possessions. Once it's in her hands, she clings to it, and if anyone attempts to take it away, she bursts into tears, sometimes having a full-fledged breakdown. This tendency has resulted in numerous unpleasant situations, particularly while we are out in public. My parents frequently have to bargain with individuals or buy these pink trinkets from complete strangers simply to get Corey to calm down. I've seen them pay for a variety of strange pink items, some of which are worthless to us, but mean everything to Corey at the time. I understand why they do it, and I understand that it's more than a wish for her. It's practically a need over which she has no control. However, watching my parents devote so much time, money, and mental energy to soothing her urges and satisfying her demands has left me feeling forgotten. Furthermore, my parents' approach to parenting Corey has had serious ramifications over the years. Their method of keeping her satisfied has devolved into what I can only describe as a shopping addiction. For Corey, it began simply enough. Every weekend, my parents would purchase her something pink, a toy, a piece of jewelry, or another trinket to keep her happy, and as a bargaining chip for her cooperation throughout the week. My parents would tell Corey that she had to be a good girl if she wanted them to give her whatever she wanted, and she would instantly agree. What began as a temporary arrangement quickly evolved into a cherished family ritual. These purchases are not inexpensive either. Many of the goods Corey desires are one of a kind or custom made, which frequently requires a significant investment. For a long time, I didn't think about the cost of all this pink stuff. I thought my parents could afford it. I never questioned how they could afford to continue this habit week after week, year after year. But soon, I discovered something I could not have anticipated. My parents had not been managing their expenses through regular budgeting or savings. They have been committing fraud to cover the rising prices. You see, when I was born, my grandparents established a trust fund for both me and Corey, with equal sums given to us. Corey, who has Down syndrome, was supposed to use the money for her therapies or whatever else she needed, but I was supposed to use mine for college or a down payment on a home. Only my parents had access to these funds, but my grandparents trusted them to handle them carefully. They also made certain that Corey and I were aware of these trust funds from a young age, allowing us to rely on them for financial support. It was a thoughtful present from my grandparents, and I always felt secure knowing that the trust fund would be available when the time came. When Corey reached 18, she received a portion of the trust monies. Since she still lives with and relies on my parents, they have been in charge of managing her money. They've utilized her trust fund over the years to assist pay for her treatments and therapies, which have become more demanding as she's gotten older. The money has helped with everything, from her medical treatment to providing the materials she requires for daily life. I recognize that the money was intended to meet her needs, and I never questioned how it was being spent. When I turned 18, I anticipated to get my half of the trust fund, as promised. I had previously planned to utilize the money for my college tuition. Once that was taken care of, I intended to preserve the remainder for any additional bills that would arise as I approach maturity. I had my future planned out, and I was counting on that fund to help me forge a steady route forward. But little did I know, my hopes would soon be dashed. My grandparents arranged a fantastic 18th birthday party for me last week. They had done the same for Corey when she turned 18, so I had been looking forward to my own celebration for quite some time. They had invited everyone in their family. I was genuinely pleased, surrounded by the people I cared about, and it was one of those days when everything felt just right. Following the cake cutting, my grandparents made an announcement to the entire gathering. They told me how proud they were to see me all grown up and gone to college, and that as a birthday present this year, I would receive the trust fund they had put up for me years before. The entire room erupted in cheers and clapping, with everyone praising me on this incredible gift. I felt a rush of exhilaration and thankfulness come over me as I hugged and thanked my grandparents for everything. But in the midst of all the enthusiasm, I saw that my parents were the only ones who did not appear joyful. While everyone else smiled and congratulated me, my parents seemed unconcerned. They stood off to the side, their faces strained, almost uncomfortable. I could see them exchanging glances, and while they didn't say anything, there was a discomfort to them that was difficult to miss. It struck me as peculiar, but in the excitement of the celebration, I didn't give it much thought. I wanted to enjoy the rest of the party, so I put it to the back of my mind. Later that evening, when we got home from the party, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. My parents appeared uptight and didn't speak much with me. Typically, they were concerned about Corey's health, mood, or anything she needed. But that night, Corey appeared absolutely satisfied, playing with one of her new gifts. Sensing something else was going on, I finally asked my folks if there was anything wrong. That's when my father gave me a serious look and informed me that he and my mother needed to talk to me alone. The tone of his voice immediately sent shivers down my spine. I could see it was serious. We sat together in the living room, and they exchanged troubled looks before my father began to talk. He explained, almost tentatively, that they wouldn't be able to give me my trust fund as my grandparents had planned. I didn't understand what he meant at first, so I asked him to clarify. My father continued, his voice full of shame and despair. He revealed that throughout the years, they had spent all of Corey's trust fund on her. When there was nothing left, they began to utilize the money from my trust fund, which they had access to. With a big sigh, he revealed that 90% of my trust fund was already gone, leaving little for me. I was taken aback as I considered what he had just stated. The money set aside for my future, for my education, was gone. He went on to say that the majority of money had been spent on my sister's shopping habit and the various treatments she required. As his words sank in, a numbness crept over me. My thoughts raced, attempting to figure out how this happened without my knowledge. They had raided my trust fund without informing me to cover Corey's bills and habits. I questioned why they would do something like this to me. My parents began to justify themselves, their words laced with defensiveness. They informed me that caring for Corey had cost them a lot of money, but they had no choice but to do it. Her needs have always come first. My father discussed the never-ending expenses, the therapies, treatments, and, of course, the innumerable gifts she required every week to stay calm. I contended that they could have ceased buying her all of those items when they learned they were financially taxing. They did, however, highlight that for Corey, these goods were more than just luxuries. They were things that helped her manage and made her world a bit simpler to understand. And for them, every penny spent had been worthwhile. They couldn't simply refuse her. At that point, I felt a rush of rage fill up inside me. I questioned how they could justify spending nearly everything I had saved for my future, without even speaking with me. Didn't I matter to them? My father tried to calm me down, stating that I needed to comprehend what they had been through. He discussed the stress they'd felt, the sacrifices they'd had to make as Corey's caregivers, and how difficult it was to satisfy her requirements week after week. My mother nodded, noting that Corey's condition necessitated continual care, and sometimes that meant spending money in ways that were unfair to me, but were important for Corey. Both of them felt that because I didn't have any of Corey's ailments, I had an advantage over her. Therefore, I shouldn't be so greedy with the money. I felt a tear of frustration run down my cheek as I assured them that I wasn't doubting Corey's needs or their decision to prioritize her care. I loved her too. But this was about the lack of honesty, how they had gone behind my back and exploited what was meant to be my future without believing I deserved to know. I informed them that this trust money had been my only source of security, the one thing I felt I could rely on to start my life on my own, and it was now almost completely gone. Instead of addressing how upset and betrayed I felt, they began gaslighting me, turning the subject around on me. They expressed disappointment that I couldn't be more understanding, and that as Corey's sister, I should appreciate that sometimes sacrifices were necessary. They said, "We are all in this together." I was astounded that they wanted me to simply accept it all as a fool, to realize that Corey's needs had to come first, no questions asked. I questioned them why it was always Corey and not me. Did they not want me to do anything in my life? That's when my parents revealed a plan they had for my future, which revolves solely around taking on the task of caring for Corey. They explained that they never cared about my education because it isn't that important. They expected me to step up and help them with Corey's financial and emotional needs. My mother looked at me with a mix of pleading and resignation, saying, "You know, we're getting older, and it's exhausting looking after Corey. We won't be able to do this forever, so we need you to step in." She went on to say that they didn't mind if I went to a local college rather than the college of my choice. She only hoped I'd get a steady job as soon as I graduated so I could bring Corey to live with me. Then she said we could finally rest. Dad advised that I start contributing financially sooner while still in college by working a part-time job and sending money home to Corey. It would help Corey have some independence in her life, he told me, by letting her buy whatever it is that she wants and allowing her to maintain the lifestyle. I sat there, stunned, trying to figure out what my folks expected me to do. At that point, I felt completely misled and frustrated. This was not the future I envisioned for myself. It seemed as if my parents expected me to abandon my own aspirations and plans in order to easily transition into their role as Corey's caregiver without ever asking what I desired for my own life. Finally, I roared at them, my voice quivering with years of accumulated rage and hurt. Have you ever thought about what I want? Or am I just here to live for Corey? You never even thought to ask me what I wanted, did you? All these years, I've been expected to just give and give. And now you're pushing me to be Corey's caretaker so you can rest? How is any of this fair? My voice trembled as the rage spilled out. You're making decisions for me without even considering what it means for my life. I can't just drop everything for Corey and pretend like my dreams don't matter. All of my bottled up anger spilled out, years of feeling forgotten, years of being told I needed to prioritize Corey, and years of watching them pander to her every whim, while I was expected to quietly support from the sidelines. My folks constantly attempt to persuade me that I shouldn't be so selfish and inconsiderate. It was as if they wanted me to conform and embrace a life I had never planned for, simply because they believed it was better for Corey. So since last week, I've been completely ignoring my parents. All I feel for them is contempt. Am I the asshole for reporting my parents for taking my trust fund and spending it on my sister? Update 1. Wow. This post has gone viral in just a few hours. Thank you for all your advice. I am currently on my way to tell my grandparents everything. Since the trust fund was created with their money, I believe it is critical that I have their support while I confront this matter. After I've explained everything to them, I plan to let my grandparents decide what we should do next. I trust their judgment and know they will have my best interests at heart as we find out how to tackle this together. I had kept my voice shut all these time because I truly believed my folks would finally come around. However, it is evident that they have not. Update 2. It has been 2 weeks since my last update, so I told my grandparents everything. They were as astonished as I was to learn that my parents had utilized my trust fund without my authorization. That same week, My grandparents came to question my parents about what had happened to my trust fund. My grandparents had worked hard to establish the fund for both me and Corey. They were deeply committed to ensuring that we have the financial resources we require for our futures. They were understandably upset when they discovered that my parents had illegally drained the money behind their backs. My parents answered by telling them the same sob story they had shared with me. They recounted, once again, how they had been obliged to spend the money on Corey's care and therapy. They urged my grandparents to explain why they did what they did, as if their rationale would somehow make it all right. But my grandfather would have none of it. He roared at them, his voice filled with fury and amazement. He told them, unequivocally, that they were accountable for repaying the whole trust fund, regardless of the circumstances or justifications for its use. He was visibly angry and felt betrayed by my parents' conduct. For a moment, I hoped they'd finally accept responsibility and set things right. Then, frightened, my mother came to my grandparents and began pleading with them. She indicated that caring for Corey was difficult and that her needs were numerous and frequent. She stated that Corey's trust money was insufficient to support the increasing costs of her treatments and ongoing bills. She rationalized taking my trust fund by claiming it helped them care for Corey. And then, in an almost horrible twist of fate, my parents turned against me. They reprimanded me for telling my grandparents everything. They were upset that I had revealed their activities and forced them to face the repercussions. My dad, in particular, was furious. He told me, with a strong edge in his voice, that I should consider myself fortunate since I was born normal, unlike Corey, and that I shouldn't despise her sister so much. It was as if my entire life, my challenges and needs, didn't matter. Everything revolved around Corey. And now, I was being punished for not fitting in with the role they had chosen for me. Without thinking, I looked them in the eye and told them straight out that if they didn't give me back the money I owed, I would sue them and make sure they went to jail for their actions. I reminded them that what they did was illegal, and there was no way they could justify it in court. They couldn't prove otherwise that the trust fund was intended for me, and only me. My tone was calm, but my comments were plain and firm. I could see the color drain from my parents' faces as they comprehend what I had just spoken. For the first time, I genuinely stood up for myself, and I could see the shock in their faces. They were not used to me being that straightforward, so resolute. Fortunately, my grandparents nodded in accord. They supported me because they knew I was correct. Seeing their encouragement, I persisted, speaking with greater conviction. I told my parents that it didn't matter how much they spent on Corey or what they did for her. Corey was their child, and it wasn't my obligation to give up my future for her. I loved Corey, of course, and I would always be there for her, but I wasn't going to sacrifice my own life, education, and goals just to make her feel cared for. I made it plain that I was tired of always coming second to her, of being overlooked while her needs were always prioritized. I finished by declaring I was done with them. I had had enough of being treated like the invisible child, who was expected to meekly accept whatever scraps were left for her. For the first time in my life, I stood up for myself, and I knew I could never take it back. My parents had pushed me to my limit, and I was not going to allow them to continue to dictate my life. My father instantly disagreed, his voice full of shock and anger, insisting that I couldn't threaten them with jail. He told me that as their child, I should have family loyalty and be willing to support them at all times, especially after everything they had done for me over the years. His statements were intended to make me feel guilty and to remind me of my responsibilities to them. My mother, attempting to ease the situation, even weighed in, proposing that since there was still 10% of my trust fund remaining, I could simply accept it and keep my mouth shut. It felt like they were treating me like a charity case, as if the residual crumbs from my trust fund were all I deserved. and I should forget about anything else. But my granddad refused to back down. He came in, his voice stern, and informed my parents that if they didn't agree to give me back the full amount, he would get the best lawyer in town to sue them. The possibility of legal action appeared to have had a significant impact on my parents. They eventually became silent, recognizing my grandfather meant business. After a tense exchange, they reluctantly admitted that what they had done was incorrect. Nonetheless, they begged my grandparents for some time to consider things over. However, the ramifications didn't stop there. My father was furious with me for exposing them to my grandparents and threatening him and Mom with jail time. In his rage, he declared that he never wanted to see my face again. He urged me to leave his house, stating he had had enough of supporting a selfish person like me, someone who could backstab their own family like this. When my grandparents heard this, they quickly offered to have me move in with them. They assured me that I always had a home with them, and that they would help me in every way they could as I worked out my next steps. So, without hesitation, I packed my clothing, gathered my necessary documents, and moved out of my parents' house. Currently, I live with my grandparents. I hate that my parents have just kicked me out, but I'm also relieved to be away from them. I miss Corey a lot. I'm aware that what I did has permanently damaged my relationship with my family. However, I do not regret standing up for myself. Update 3. It's been a month since I last updated. After much pressure and legal threats from my grandfather, my parents finally signed an agreement drawn out by my grandfather's lawyer. The terms were easy. Because they could not repay the entire cash they had taken from me in one lump sum, they would make installments over the next 18 months. This would give them time to pay off the loan gradually, without putting a hardship on their finances all at once. However, the agreement had a vital stipulation. If they failed to make any payment by the agreed upon date, or if they did not follow through at all, my grandparents and I had the right to initiate urgent legal action. This clause served as a safeguard, ensuring that they couldn't avoid paying me back. My folks are still unhappy with me. They blame me for everything that has happened, and it seems like they are unable to let go of their wrath or humiliation. They still don't understand why I took the actions I did and stood up for myself in such a dramatic fashion. Despite their hatred, my grandma has assured me that none of this is my fault. She told me again today that I did what I needed to do to protect myself and my future, and that I should focus on moving forward now rather than looking back. I see Corey from time to time. She misses me, and I miss her also. She frequently inquires about me, and it is evident that she is unaware of the complete picture. But she understands enough to see that something significant occurred between us. She's noticed that I'm not as present as I once was, and that my parents did something to injure me. It's horrible not to be able to help her understand how bad our parents are. Regardless, I'll always be there for her. I was dumped by my ex-fiancée just before our wedding. 15 years later, she has returned, filled with scars and regrets, asking for another chance. She simply went without saying anything, or leaving a note soon before our big wedding, and I never received an explanation. Her relatives couldn't understand either. She disappeared without a trace, leaving me and everyone else in the dark. Despite the fact that we had spent high school and college together, she didn't come back to me. Her parents had to inform me that she didn't want me around and had no plans to return. I never understood why she did it, but I was forced to honor her demands. Since she stopped communicating with everyone, I could only assume that she suffered a mental breakdown. I've battled the unsolved questions ever since, even though we were both young and still figuring life out. Then she suddenly wants to meet up and DMs me on Facebook. Anger, anxiety, optimism, and despair are all over me after all these years. I'm still attracted to her. Her Facebook profile makes me miss her, but I'm not sure if I could bring her back. She is unmarried, and even more gorgeous than before. I'm torn. She says it's preferable to talk about it face to face, but she won't elaborate on why she left. All I can infer from her Facebook post is a great deal of regret. Talks about loneliness, feeling weak, and leading a shameful existence. It's annoying. I should not have anything to do with her after she abandoned me, but the truth is that I couldn't stop thinking about her. What ought I to do? Should I confront her, ghost her back, or see where we might go with this meeting? TLDR. After more than 15 years, my ex-fiancée DMs me on Facebook and asks to go on a date. She abandoned me prior to our wedding, so I haven't spoken to her since. Important remarks. Wow. OP. That's difficult. It's been 16 years. Would you find closure you never got, or would seeing her set you back after all this time? OP? I'm not sure. All I want is closure. I believe she had cheated on me for a long time, but based on what her family and some friends told me, it appeared to be more of a mental breakdown. She was anxious about finals and her profession, and she was afraid about the wedding. She eventually made a comeback after ghosting everyone, but I was never involved. I've been thinking about her constantly. You should try to get closure by meeting her, but don't go in expecting her to return. You may not feel the same way about her today, but you do feel something for the person you knew. It's a long time to be abandoned like that. 16 years. Her motivations for contacting me after all this time seemed dubious to me. Avoid thinking about her too much. OP. What would be her motivation? She wasn't pregnant when she abandoned me, and I don't have any money or children. The disappearance was completely unexpected. She simply disappeared and never returned to school. To be honest, I think something went wrong. Revision? That was something then. At least I had closure. We sat and chatted outside the cafe where we met. Her severely scarred arms and the intense pain imprinted on her face caught my attention right away. In summary, she acknowledged that she had intended to end the relationship long before the wedding, but had been too cowardly and weak to advocate for herself. Everything caused her to have a total nervous breakdown. She felt unable to defend herself and was fed up with being forced to do things she didn't want to do. She was upset with her family for forcing her into a degree she didn't desire and for pressuring her to get married and start a family. She also felt angry at herself for lacking the guts to speak up. We both agreed that nothing she did was justified. I put her on the spot when I proposed to her for the first time in public. She wanted to refuse, but she couldn't risk hurting me. She was correct. I made all of her decisions. Back then, I was a very different person. I was self-centered, and she was submissive, just following the crowd without advocating for herself. I frequently muffled her speech, preventing her from developing or becoming her own person. Everything culminated at one point, and she suffered a total mental collapse. The only person she ever trusted, her best friend, advised her to flee her issues. She claimed that the only thing she knew how to do was to flee. Her life took a turn for the worse. She didn't say what she had done, but she ended up in prison for a while after being homeless for a few years, after being evicted by her best friend's husband. Since her release, almost a year ago, she has been making efforts to improve her life. She ultimately got in touch with me, got a job, and reconnected with her parents. We both agreed that there isn't a future for us. We now live far apart and are two different persons who have nothing in common. She doesn't demand forgiveness or justify her actions. She is disgusted and ashamed of what she did. I just forgiven her because I wanted to be furious, but couldn't. After saying our goodbyes and shaking hands, it's likely that we won't see each other again. It's heartbreaking. At last, she and I were able to get the closure we sought. A weight seems to have been lifted. I now realize that we will never have a future together. However, I'm also upset because it's really over. It was all for nothing. All these years of hope. Not many people can say that, but in the end, this is an ending. And I've finally found closure. Should I trust her story? I do indeed. And is it really important now, even if she is full of it? She has always struck me as being very meek and weak-willed. When things get too tough, she usually just follows everyone's instructions and flees. Because she is too frail to deal with her issues, she avoids them. Her family was the usual tiger parents, who deny their troubled child. So I guess it makes sense that they wouldn't tell me anything about her. TLDR, if it ends well, everything is okay. Finally, our relationship is over, and we can both move on. Important remarks. However, her companion ought to have been the one to notice it. Her companion acted as a facilitator. All of us were. The person who urged her to run was her friend. Anything was all up to her, of course. No one made her do anything. However, I might have anticipated it if I hadn't disregarded her issues and had instead been more involved in her life. But it is what it is. Wait a second. OP, where did you find an open cafe? Asterisk. It's partially open. We sat in the parking lot and ordered takeout. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The proposal shouldn't come as a surprise. You should be fully informed before proceeding. At some point, talk about it as something you both desire. If the other person isn't prepared, dropping it at random puts a lot of pressure on them. In actuality, she was correct. In order to ensure that she wouldn't say no, I purposefully proposed in public. All I could think of was myself. I never thought she was unhappy, or that a public proposal may make her uncomfortable. You had a good ending, but she didn't. You seem to have contributed to her issues at the time. Have you shown regret for how you handled her? Did you make amends or provide assistance? To be honest, I felt horrible because I just wasn't there for her. I contributed to her anxiety and sorrow. I was prone to taking her for granted. She didn't want to hurt me, so she wanted to end the relationship. She believed that being married to me wouldn't be all that horrible. However, she simply broke. The idea of being in a lie-based, loveless marriage became too much. With a snap, she fled. I did love her, but to be honest, I wouldn't have been so oblivious to her needs if I really loved her. I could have liked the idea of her more than I actually loved her. This is forcing me to examine myself closely. Mysterious blood stains in my bed lead to a shocking discovery. Hidden black mold in my attic room, causing my hay fever symptoms. Let me just start by saying that I am a man, and so I don't get a period. I have been living on my own in Amsterdam for a while now. It's a nice little room in the attic. It's old, nice, and feels very cozy. I don't live in a dorm, but I live with an older lady who has 2 cats. I'm allergic to myself, so when those cats come this way, I chase them out the door. Now I have a problem. A few days ago, I woke up with clothes on, my closet turned over, and clothes on the floor. Shit. Sleepwalking can happen. Now, things are getting a little weird. On the entire left side of my double bed, from head to toe, there is a long trail of blood, as if something bloody has been running over it. This can't be the cats, because they don't come into my room at night, and it also seems unlikely to me that an injured animal has been walking there, because if something bleeds that much, it should be visible somewhere else in the room, right? It also seemed unlikely to me that I myself bled a vertical trail in my sleep, but I didn't think anything else of it. I cleaned it up and that was that. But this morning, a few days later, I woke up blood everywhere again on that side of the bed. And with blood everywhere, I really mean a trail you can't miss. And the smell. I woke up because of the smell and not even my alarm clock. 06:30. I went to ask the housewife what she thinks this could be. She smiled for a moment and said, "Maybe your room is haunted." Well, that didn't make it better. I'm now sitting in the bathroom scrubbing that sheet again and trying not to throw up. I don't know what's going on here. But could this be a weird hazing problem? And by that, I mean student hazing. Is this a normal thing they do in Amsterdam? Smear blood on your bed? I'm just saying. I'm from Brussels. I know there are weird things happening here. I don't get it at all, especially because I've scanned my whole body and there are no wounds anywhere. Has anyone experienced something similar? Is my room genuinely possessed? Sorry if this is a stupid question, but I'm kind of done with it. Relevant comments. Commenter. Have read this before. Someone who had bled from his ears. You don't often see that, so it's logical that you don't see a wound. Have your ears checked and place a camera if you are not sure. Maybe just block the door on the inside or something. Oop, I'm definitely going to do that. Good idea. I'll ask the doctor right after class today to schedule an appointment. Commenter, please go get a carbon monoxide meter from Action Praxis. Those things are 10. Nausea and smelling things that aren't there. You mentioned sulfur. Are both symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning. Plus the fact that this is happening in winter, so you probably have more heating stove on than normal. Oop, I'm pretty scared of this now. I just checked the symptoms online, and they do match. I'm going straight to the hardware store after class. Starting to get nervous about this commenter. Perhaps something about bed bugs that you roll flat in your sleep after they feed. Oop, yuck. It's on the comforter though. Don't think I rolled over them, but could have been an answer. Commenter, you specifically mentioned that the first time that you woke up with clothes on. Different clothes, therefore, than you had fallen asleep with. Were there other weird things this morning or just blood? Yes. Different clothes than what I went to bed with. I went to sleep in my pajamas. Logical. And I woke up with my sweater and jeans on. I have never walked before. This morning, only blood. Thank God. Otherwise, I would have scheduled an appointment with the psychologist. Update. Few days later, update. For the past few days, I've been staying at my friend's house. See if it's mysteriously bleeding there too. I ordered a camera, and nothing happened. Until yesterday morning, I went back home, went to the doctor on the way because I suffer from hay fever. And once home, just checked the cats for being in heat. Turns out they're both male, unfortunately. I set up the camera in a can, thanks to whoever advised that, and went into the space behind my room with a CO detector to measure it. The second I got in there, I smelled a very familiar smell. Exactly the smell that vaguely smelled like blood. Now that I know what it is, I would associate it more with meat. But the smell of blood came very close. Anyway, I grabbed the CO detector, shirt in front of my nose, and put that thing to work. Nothing wrong. Anyway, I called my friend because the smell was very specific. She was there within an hour, and she too thought it smelled very strangely of blood. It's a large attic which smells of blood and rotted flesh. And there are things everywhere in the dark. Of course, my imagination ran wild. My girlfriend also started to get the jitters, and after an hour of pondering, we decided to call the police. Well, they showed up on my doorstep after 4 hours, and together we went upstairs. The police also smelled the odor, and it was so convincing that some other special agents were called in before they went up into the attic. Very long story short. After a long wait and search, they didn't find a body, but they did find mold. All over the wall against my room. Under the baseboards. On the roof. Black mold everywhere. Immediately relieved that my landlord wasn't a murderer, but black mold isn't a fun joke either. In the meantime, I've moved all my stuff and am temporarily living with my girlfriend until the problem is solved. Even then, I don't know if I'll go back because the landlord wasn't very happy that I kind of suspected her of murder. But that's another story. It's funny because as the doctor said when I came in with my hay fever, it's remarkable that you're suffering from it now. He was right. The itchy eyes, the nosebleed in my sleep. Yes, it turned out to be a nosebleed. The sleepwalking, the tired days, everything in place. End of story. I do want to thank you all individually for your kind messages and earnest attempts to help. Thanks to you, I went behind the room to check that meter. I wonder if I would have found out about the fungus if I hadn't. Thanks so much, really. Relevant comments. Comment 1. I get it's not as bad as a body, but the thought of there being black mold all around me and the walls. Growing day after day is still skin crawling awful. And I wish more people realized how shit hay fever and other allergies is, and how many symptoms there are. I think people think it's just sneezing a bit, not the weeks of misery some of us experience. Comment 2. The lady's reaction of maybe your room is haunted makes me feel like she knew there was a problem, but they just didn't want to deal with it. Which is why the landlord is unhappy. Since now the authorities are involved, they have no choice but to clean it up. At my best friend's wedding, the groom admitted he wasn't sure if he wanted to marry her. What should I do? Original post. Alright, was just a MOH in a wedding that ended in an absolute shit show, and I have to tell someone about it because I don't even know what to do, or if I should do anything about this. I'm at a total loss. This was a first for me. My childhood friend was getting married today to her high school sweetheart. The wedding was a long time coming. They've been together for 6.5 years and share a 2-year-old son together. They've been engaged for 3 years now because they delayed planning the wedding after she unexpectedly got pregnant with their son. So now the wedding was finally here. Earlier this year, she set a date and started planning. I was engaged this year and got married in July, and originally was just supposed to be a regular bridesmaid. The bride's sister was supposed to be the MOH, but they had a falling out. Basically, the bride would always call her sister ranting about her fiancé every time they would fight, which caused the sister to form a pretty negative opinion of him. Sister lives across several states away and doesn't see everything that goes on here. Her mind jumped right to abuse, and she told the bride if she marries him, she's not coming to the wedding. Now here's the thing. Their relationship isn't perfect. They are young. They went through a lot very quickly and very young. Getting engaged, unexpected pregnancy, moving in together, all happened very fast. They fought a lot. I had my concerns at first, but after spending a lot more time with them, I saw how much they genuinely loved each other, parented their son together well, and were working towards a future together. The bride and I have been close friends for so much of our lives. She is like family to me. I care for her deeply. When she asked me to step in as MOH, I said yes for those reasons. Cut to today, the wedding day. Everything was going well. Groom was getting emotional when they did their private vows, and before walking down the aisle, he was still wiping tears. It warmed my heart. Looking back now, I wonder what the heck was going through his head. Not sure they were tears of joy. As the night went on, the bride mingled and danced with her family. She had so much family that traveled from many states away to be here, and she wanted to be a good hostess to them. The groom was usually off talking with his own family when she was doing this, but for the most part, they stayed together. They sat together, ate together, danced to a few songs, played the shoe game, then they were mingling separately with their families. Didn't think that was a big deal, as this is often how receptions go with so many people, they're pulling you in opposite directions. At one point, they both went inside the venue. Reception was outside for a while, and then she came out alone. She continued to chat with family, and then after a little bit realized he was nowhere to be found. After a while of searching, we found him wandering around outside, going for a walk. Bride was pretty distraught at this point. I will add that the groom did have a good amount to drink during the party. Apparently, when they went inside the venue, he was angry at her for not spending enough time with him during the party and said they were hardly together the whole night. Once he got back from his little walk, they were just arguing inside their room, I guess. At this point, a lot of guests were leaving, and the ones left me, my husband, the rest of the wedding party, and their immediate families didn't really know what to do. We were supposed to do a big send-off for them, so we were just kind of waiting for that. We packed up all the stuff, broke down all the tables and chairs, loaded it in cars, and just waited. Me and the other bridesmaids pulled her aside to talk to her. but she was pretty deflated at this point. Apparently, the groom had taken his ring off and told her he wasn't sure he wanted to be married to her. At their wedding, mind you, they've been living together for 3 years. They share a child. They've been dating since 2018. Nothing about this was rushed, other than maybe their ages. They are quite young, but I never thought of them as immature until this stunt he pulled at their wedding over not spending enough time together at the reception. Like, sorry. Why not just not leave her side then? I just don't understand at all. We finally decided to just load their stuff in their car and tell them it's all loaded and they should probably go ahead and go to get some sleep before their flight tomorrow. At the car, we hugged goodbye and I left to come home. This girl is one of my absolute best friends. I hate that her beautiful wedding was ruined by her husband being petty and stubborn. She was in tears and distraught on her own wedding day. It's just awful. I don't really know where to go from here. If this is at all normal and something they will get past, or if this is more serious. I genuinely am rooting for them. But this whole situation just has me sitting in my car, feeling confused and worried for my friend. They're leaving for their honeymoon tomorrow. Don't feel like it's an appropriate time to reach out and try to talk to her about all of this. Any advice is appreciated, I guess. I'm thinking I check in via text a few times while they're traveling on the honeymoon and make sure it's going okay, and make plans to see her when she gets back, and we can debrief everything then if she wants to get into it. Starting to think the sister might have been onto something. Relevant comments. Night woman cometh. Oh. Lots of problems here. The SIS was onto something. If the bride is constantly calling her with complaints, fights, the groom is not a good fit for her. 2. The groom was drunk. This took his feelings from a 3. Hey, can we spend the rest of the reception together? To a 10, you are dead to me because you are ditching me at our wedding night for totally reasonable reasons. 3. Sounds like this wedding spat was just a representation of chronic issues between them. If this relationship is going to last, they need to see a therapist. This is beyond your aid. Unfortunately, personally, I wouldn't text or say anything today or tomorrow. She is probably distraught. They need to work out some things on their honeymoon. Maybe check in with her when she's back, or she'll reach out to you if she needs advice. That's what I would want anyways. But you know her best. Warren Finn. Literally this. I think when you said the sister doesn't see everything that goes on, I do. You're off by a lot. You're seeing the smoke show. The sister is hearing about the reality. OPC. I'll add a little context here though. I grew up with the bride, and, besides her sister, I'm probably the only friend she has that is her friend. I did not know her husband before they got together, and still didn't know him super well before she got pregnant. Her other friends are all extensions of him somehow. His siblings and in-laws, his friends' girlfriends. I feel like a lot of the issue is that she needs more people to actually talk to. Her sister will always take her side. His family will always take his side and shrug things off, as that's just how he is. I have just tried my best to be somewhat of a Switzerland presence for her. She knows I support her, but in that, I also support her relationship. And I know marriage is hard, especially with kids. So I try to support them both. Legitimate_Cat31935. I have so many questions. Just trying to understand the dynamics of this group. 1. In what scenario did she not grow up in the same house as her sister? 2. What were his parents doing at the reception, and were they aware of his hissy fit? 3. Is it safe to assume that his parents were still there at the end? 4. What were her parents doing at the end? 5. Who had their child? Oop, half-sisters through adoption by the dad too. His parents sat at their own table and didn't seem to care about mingling with her family, but I don't want to jump to conclusions as to why. 3. His parents were still there at the end, and his dad looked really disappointed when helping us load their car. I pulled his mom aside and asked her to go talk to her son, because she may be the only one he listens to right now. She did talk to him, and was the one who ended up getting him to come out of his room. ID key what was said. 4. Her parents were helping clean up, and I don't think they knew the full extent of what was going on. They were still talking to guests. It wasn't until the next day, when I talked to both of them, that I realized they were not aware what the groom said about being unsure about the marriage, taking his ring off, etc. They thought they had a little spat that got resolved quickly before they left. 5. Groom's mom had the baby most of the time, and towards the end of the night, he fell asleep in the groom's sister's arms. He went home with the bride's parents that night because they're watching him while they go on honeymoon. Update. It's been a week now, and a lot of people asked for an update. Some people on my original post were very adamant. This relationship was abusive, citing red flags, research evidence, and personal anecdotes that this story reminded you of. There were also several comments saying, I was overreacting. The groom was just drunk, and they will probably be fine. I wanted to clarify some things from my original post. While my friend, the bride, does have her sister, she was the only child growing up in her house. In many ways, she truly is an only child. She is at least the only child of her mother. She already had a small circle, her family lives all over the country, and is not involved very much in her life. That was not the groom's doing. He did not isolate her. Secondly, I would like to clarify their ages, because I didn't mention them in my last post. They started dating at 15 and 16 and got married at 21 and 22. Part of the reason I omitted it originally is because I didn't want people jumping to conclusions about their relationship because of their ages. There is a lot of stigma around getting married young, especially on Reddit. And I get it. The odds are stacked against you. That's why I decided to put their ages in now. Because I realize it's important to understand they really do have so much growing and learning to do still. Now onto the update. It's pretty short. She Snapchatted me later that night, after they got to their hotel, and said as he began to sober up, he was realizing all that he ruined, and was very apologetic. He realized they didn't get to do their last dance, their send-off, the bouquet and garter toss. She said he was crying. They talked it all out, and she said it sucks that their wedding ended that way, but it was amazing up to that point. And the important thing is that they're married and going to spend the rest of their lives together. She said they're going to work past it, and I asked how. Do you have a plan? Just want to be sure. She said they will work on their communication skills, and I once again recommended therapy. She said they'd talk about it and consider it. Then they were off on their honeymoon and seemed to be having a great time. I've checked in a bit when she has Snapchatted me some pics, and they're doing well. She knows she can always come to me, and she knows I'll support her no matter what. Right now, I'm gonna do everything I can to help uplift them as a couple and help them form some better communication habits. Her sister didn't support her choice to stay with him, and that's why sister is not in her life anymore. I don't want that. I will support her choice. Period. A few key takeaways. Be careful drinking on your wedding day. You don't need that much. The last thing you want is to get drunk on your wedding day and say, do something stupid, as a result that you can't take back. One commenter put it really well. You may be able to overlook your partner's ugly parts now, but are you willing to let this be your life if they never change? I know there's a lot of people in this subreddit that are getting married, so I hope someone can learn something from this story. Relevant comments. Comment 1. I skimmed OP's responses, and she literally says, the friend likes to use Snapchat because the messages disappear, so the groom won't see them if he goes through her phone. Then she adds a nice little tidbit that he's very controlling. But somehow, the takeaway is to be careful about drinking on your wedding day. And the couple is doing well? I'll chalk OP's Utter lack of discernment, up to her age as well. Because I'm going to assume she's also 21. 22. Comment 2. He definitely sounds like an abuser. But I guess OP is one of those people who thinks abuse only counts if it's physical. But he's definitely emotionally abusive at the least. What OP is seeing is an abuse love bomb cycle. OP mistakenly thinks the love bomb stuff proves that he loves her so much, when in fact that's merely a tactic to keep her from leaving him due to the abuse. Comment 3. How is the main takeaway? Don't drink too much at your wedding. People get wasted on their wedding day and don't take their ring off and say they shouldn't be married. I would say that's far more frequent than whatever this is. Comment 4. OP missed the point so hard. I'm almost tempted to call her a troll. Like, how do you write that all out, then not have a fucking epiphany that the relationship was built on rotten foundations? Oh, but I've seen how much they love each other. And love is rarely enough to fix a fundamentally broken relationship. Those two need actual, professional help, and all they're doing is sticking their head in the sand. I get uninvited from my brother's wedding, then get harassed by his family for not caring enough. Original post. This whole thing is so weird. I, 27M, am gay. I came out at 16, and my parents told me they would always love me, but to not mention it to my older brother, who I'll call Brick. Then 1930M now. When I was confused and asked why, they said that Brick had expressed some awful opinions about gay people. I limited talking to Brick until I moved out at 18, which wasn't much of a problem, because we were never close. I went to uni, got a good job, and an awesome boyfriend, 28 mems, in my home city. Me and my boyfriend Angel live a peaceful life. Peaceful, until a few days ago, when I got a call from my brother. I was concerned that Brick was calling me, as we have never messaged before, just had each other's numbers for emergency purposes. I picked up because maybe there was some emergency happening. He opened the call with an annoyed, "Hey, man," and I knew something was up. He said he was getting married to his fiancée, Yen 24F, next year. I didn't even know he had a girlfriend. I was like, "That's great, Brick," and asked some boring wedding things that he begrudgingly answered. He then told me invites were being sent out in a couple weeks, and that I could bring a +1. Here's where I made the mistake that started this mess. Without thinking like an idiot, I said, "Cool, I'll bring my boyfriend." Major mess up. Brick immediately started yelling insults down the line, screaming that he wouldn't have an F slur at his wedding. I didn't say anything and just hung up. I was rattled by hearing those words from my own brother's mouth, even though I knew his feelings about people like me. I told Angel, and he comforted me, ordering in my favorite restaurant and watching movies with me, which was awesome. We went to bed later, and I felt all right the next day. I sent my parents a message that Brick invited me and uninvited me from his wedding pretty much in the same breath, and went on my way to work. Not a clue of the crap storm waiting for me when I got off. When I turned my phone on again after my shift, it was blowing up. Messages and calls from my parents and relatives galore asking me what the F happened. I phoned my parents back when I got home and gave them the rundown of what happened and said I honestly didn't care because it's not like Brick would be coming to my wedding anyways. My parents immediately chastised me for my obvious disinterest and disregard of my brother's life, and told me I should be apologizing to him for bringing my personal life into his wedding. What? I basically told my parents to screw off, and have been getting bombarded with messages from relatives to apologize to my brother, and get my invite reinstated, and apologize to my parents for disrespecting them, but I really don't want to. Angel's reassuring me that I did nothing wrong, but it's still nagging me. A relevant comment. Okay. Number 4988. Why did your brother sound annoyed at the beginning of the call? Did he already know? Or was he being forced to invite you by your parents? Seems weird. Oop. He's never been my biggest fan, honestly. We were very different as kids, like polar opposites, and he didn't like that. Very on brand for him. He definitely didn't know I was gay before the call. My parents have kept it very under wraps for years. In terms of if he was being forced to invite me by my parents, I really have zero clue. Update post. My OG post got locked whilst removed per some misunderstandings confusion with the AITA mods while trying to post this update. But I'll just post it on my page here without an r slash if anyone wants to see it. Y'all have really opened my eyes on a lot of issues in my family. I apologize for only replying to a few comments. There's just so many of you. Big shout out to all the people who gave compliments to Angel. I showed him this post last night, and he thanks you all. I've been showing him lots of love because he really is an angel. And to the people calling this fake, AI, cliche, and whatnot, I hate to break it to you all, but this is just my life. It sounds cliche because this is the sort of all too real thing that happens to many people in the community. Just move along if you want to say that stuff, because you're honestly just wasting your time. One of two things I would also like to address is people questioning me about thinking I could be the AH in this situation. And all I can say is that when you have a mass of people telling you you're wrong for what you did, it's hard to not maybe believe them just a little bit, no matter how absurd it is. Second thing, for people wondering how no one in the family knew I was gay, I really was, never am not close with my extended family, as they all live in different provinces, and my immediate family never traveled. We really just send each other holiday and birthday messages and have brief conversations whenever those are sent. And I just never had the urge to come out to them. Anyways, on to the update. I decided I didn't want to let this sit for any longer. I took a day off work, and I added my parents, Brick, and all the family that messaged and called me into one big group chat. For one advice I saw here, I laid out everything that went down to them, in case they were told a different story by my parents and brother. I told them that I was going see with my parents and Brick no matter what, and if they didn't apologize and realize what they did wrong, or I cut them off too. I turned my phone off and continued on without it for the rest of the day. Once I turned my phone on again, I had lots of messages from them. My parents were outraged, and Brick said nothing. Some of my extended family apologized and told me that my parents just told them I was mean to Brick about some of his wedding plan choices, which got me uninvited. Still trying to wrap my head around how stupid that is. Seriously think my parents might be Neanderthals. Anyways, the real story made others even more angry and more insistent that I apologize, and they were promptly blocked. I didn't answer any of my parents' texts, calls, and blocked them. I feel like I have a weight off my shoulders. I'm not concerned about my parents showing up at our apartment, as they moved away from my city last year. Me and Angel are planning a lovely trip, per advice of a lot of people that we thought was great, to France to visit his family during when the wedding will be taking place, which I'm very excited for. I've heard nothing but good things about them. This will most likely be my only update on this post, and I thank you all for your support.